just brief for anybody who hasn't maybe been to the Dconnect launch and hasn't familiarity with the Dconnect Health Innovation Hub out of Dundalk IT. We are, I suppose, a new entity, a couple of months old really. Here we go. That is supporting enterprise, particularly in the region, but all across Ireland, in digital health. These are our sponsors, both business and, I guess, government. Our mission is to stimulate, foster and enhance innovation in digital health for the creation of enterprises, products and services that address healthcare needs of our society. I'm a bit hoarse, so forgive me for that. But yeah, the increase in the burden of healthcare grows year on year, and there is a great hope for digital health to try and reduce that burden. So we're here to support that. I guess we connect all the different players, the businesses who are coming up with those new innovations in digital health, the healthcare sector, public and private, and the universities who are again, creating new innovations and technologies, and early stage businesses, again, who are pushing out some of those digital health innovations, and society across wellness and the public who will avail of these technologies to self-monitor and self-care. So we're creating and have a cluster built across digital health, connected health and well-being to support the startups who are in this space, to help research be commercialized, whether it's a spin out or it's a larger organization liaising, collaborating with some of the third level sector, and also the larger businesses and the investors being able to have a view of the latest technologies, so that they can perhaps support those and help to commercialize them. So we have quite a broad audience. This quadruple helix model is proven to incite innovation and push some of the new technologies and advancements to commercialization for the good of society and for healthcare and other areas. So we are working with startup and the entrepreneurial community who are supported and linked in, I guess, with all of those who support from an investor and capital perspective. A lot of government supports as well in terms of capital, but also supports for mentoring, and we provide some of those as well. We're connected with, I suppose, DKIT, but also with the other third levels, both here and across in other parts of the world. And again, there's a huge following and a huge interest from the corporates and some of the larger companies who are moving into healthcare, if they're an SME, who have not been in that already, or our SMEs and corporates that are becoming more digitized. Our key strategies here are to have that connected cluster and to enable collaboration, to create a knowledge hub and be the go-to for lots of different, I suppose, types of information, webinars, seminars, programmatic activity, but also, generally connecting people with experts in all the areas around connected health and digital health. And then we support enterprises. We have a lot of entrepreneurial support backgrounds and services available, from mentoring to prototyping. So that's something that's really quite a demand on that at the moment. And then, here in some of the seminars that we have run and workshops with particularly ECH Alliance, bringing in best practices around digital transformation, as all businesses are faced with challenges around this transition. And again, thinking global from the start, our connections are not just throughout this country in Ireland, but across different areas, because we can reach anywhere in the world from here right now. I'll actually skip through the next one in the interest of time, and just come straight to sort of reach out to ourselves, myself, Sarah and Surafel, who are all on the call today. If you are a startup and you would like support from a cybersecurity perspective, data perspective, or anything else, please reach out to any of us. If you are a larger business and you want to have, I suppose, insight into the innovations that are going on in the third level sector or across some of the smaller businesses, then reach out to us as well. We've been running a workshop series. This one is one of the series, and then we have two more in this month. The next one is this week later on data integrity, and the next one will be covering, I suppose, that transformation, digital health, covering e-health on the 28th of June. So do feel free to look into the website if you're not familiar with Dconnect, and reach us on this or any of our email addresses, dconnect@dkit.ie. And we're happy to have a mentoring session. We're happy to have a one-to-one session with you, or to connect you with people that might be able to progress your business, whether it's piloting it in a healthcare setting or advisors that can help with your business plan. We're able to provide those supports. Let's stop there and I'll hand it over.
Thank you, Angela. Thanks for that introduction to Dconnect. And now I'm going to hand you over to Andy Bleeden, who's going to give us an introduction to ECH Alliance and the wonderful service that it provides to the Dconnect community. Okay, over to you, Andy.
Thank you for that, Sarah, and thank you, Angela, for the introduction. Welcome all, and really pleased to be kicking off today's session targeting cybersecurity and health. This is of vital interest for our members. I'll talk a little bit about the European Connected Health Alliance now, but also for our ecosystems as well. What I'll also try and do today is build on the picture of what we looked at during the last session, and we'll give you details about the recording for the last session as well for those people attending this. These sessions are recorded because a lot of people tend to watch these in catch-up formation. But for today, what I'm looking to do is to build on the idea of how we use our ecosystems to connect the dots up. And you'll see today with the speakers we've got Christina and Hazel and Yanni from across our network who've come kindly today to share their experience and expertise around the area of cybersecurity, to give, I think, a more rounded view, as well as input from my colleague Diane. The European Connected Health Alliance is a member organisation, and we have been, for the last 10 years, building a large network of around 850 members globally who are organisations, most of which are from the public not-for-profit sector. They join us for various reasons. You can see the reasons in front of you on your screen, but primarily it's around promoting their organisations and making connections. They also do so because they want to get involved with our ecosystems, and I should talk today about what those are and how we use them. And our presenters today are an example of that, where we brought in expertise from our ecosystems to talk on this subject. But the other thing we try to do is actually physically connect up people. So the people who are attending today, they're here because they've got expertise in the area. You may want to make contact with them. You may want to ask questions, and please do during the session today. But they've got particular focus, whether it's in the US, in Texas with Hazel, or in Finland, central Finland, with Yanni, with Insectech there. But also Christina from Bulgaria, who leads our ecosystem in Bulgaria. I've got particular excellence in around the area of cybersecurity. It's in the news. Within Ireland now, it's very much a focus for attention for very clear reasons, and I don't need to go through the implications of it. But for all of our ecosystems, we would use the area of cybersecurity to build on the expertise and good practice from other ecosystems where we've got specific need. So we've got connections there in Ireland who we're working with very closely, using expertise from both within Ireland but also externally to help solve some of the cybersecurity issues. I've mentioned ecosystems a couple of times now. Our ecosystems are built around the concept of breaking down some of the silos in health and social care. They're around bringing together all the key stakeholders you will see on the diagram in front of you, including companies that specialise in cybersecurity. But primarily, taking the issue of cybersecurity, bringing in both healthcare providers and professionals, policymakers and researchers, to really explore what the need is around cyber and cybersecurity in particular. Obviously, that's for many people see that as an area just around data protection and protecting personal data. But cybersecurity means protecting many more things than personal data. It can mean protecting, as we've seen in America, a fuel supply or gas supplies or water provision, or even the ability to keep the lights on. So there's a whole heap of different needs around the area that will bring in that best practice from other ecosystems. We also see that as potential to create economic growth, because by bringing both need and solution together, we can connect up those dots where we can bring, we think, the best people who have got expertise in this area together to work on specific focus topics. And we've got ecosystem networks all over the globe, and you can see the range of our network here in front of you. I've just, this list gets out of date every month. I've just announced earlier on this month our establishment of our first ecosystem is going to be set up in Japan and also in Moldova, as well as new ones within Spain and Portugal. Each of those ecosystems, as I said, have got someone or a link there within, whether it's research or providers or companies who've got that expertise. So what we're there trying to do is to connect up those dots and bring in that expertise as we've done today. And as you see, we've got expertise from both the US, Finland, and also from Bulgaria. What we also do is we work with our ecosystems to collaborate, because what they want to do, as well as just the nice things of working together collaboratively, is they want to increase access into internal markets, as we're doing with the DKIT, but also to scale up innovation. So, for instance, with DKIT, with Dconnect, what we want to be able to do is scale up innovation from in and around Dundalk and the cross-border area and the whole of the Republic of Ireland, and scale it up abroad. Because we think we've got some great products there, certainly within Dundalk. We've seen some fantastic opportunities that will be best put to an external market, again, using that network we've got there. And a wider network you couldn't ask for when your product or your solution is going to those markets. We also use those ecosystems and our network to bring in best practice. So those give, I think, a good rounding of how our ecosystems work together. A practical example, I'll just go through it briefly, is we've taken both providers and purchasers and solution providers, i.e. innovators, on trade missions to, whether it's from Galicia in Spain to Slovenia or Serbia or the Netherlands, or as we're currently planning to do, between Australia and our Danish ecosystem. That allows us to have that deeper dive into connecting up dots in between our ecosystems. And then lastly, what we've done this year, we've launched a new series of what we call thematic innovation ecosystems, which, instead of being geographical in focus, bring together all the stakeholders, but in specific themes and on a cross-border nature. Now, within the island of Ireland, we've been involved with cross-border ecosystems for some time now, and run, I think, 4 of them between the Republic of Ireland and the North of Ireland. But we're trying to do this now across the globe. So we've got ecosystems that are led either by the Germans and the Norwegians around mental health, or with the Finns on smart care, or we've got the Scots leading on integrated care. But what we're trying to do is still use that same process of bringing all of those ecosystems together on a permanent platform and allowing that network and exchanging of good practice to go ahead. So that's where we're up to with our ecosystems. But I want to get back to the topic of today, and I want to turn to the subject of cybersecurity. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Diane, who's going to give a short introduction, and then we can move on to start have a discussion and hopefully share some of our best practice here today.
Thank you, Andy, and over to you, Diane.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Angela. I'm just going to share my slides. Just bear with me. Okay, so my slides there. So thank you. So I'm just going to give an overview, as Andy said, an introduction really around cybersecurity of what we're looking at currently at the moment. So just a very quick introduction for myself. I work with ECH Alliance with Andy's part of his team. as part of the ECH Alliance International Ecosystem Strategy Manager. So again, I get to work with all of the amazing ecosystems that Andy has just discussed there for the moment. Just bear with me now, my screen is, sorry, a little bit frozen, I do apologize. Yeah, so I get to work with the many ecosystems that Andy mentioned there. Many of them are here today on the call from Finland, Bulgaria, and Hazel, that's based there in Texas. So just a little bit around my background. I come from a business and e-health consultancy background for the last 20 years. So I'm very passionate and interested in e-health consultancy. I'm a founding board member of eHealth Ireland since 2015. So that was back when the HSE decided to look at a digital format. And I'm delighted to say that I'm sharing the platform today with my good friend and board member, Hazel Chaplin from Texas in Ishka Healthcare today. So again, I've been a program director and lecturer for the last number of years around digital transformation, entrepreneurship, innovation, and data analytics. So it's really important. Data is really important also. So just bear with me now. I'm just going to, that slide is just a little bit stuck on me. So I just want to jump straight in to have a discussion around the dark net. And I think we'd all agree that every side, you know, to technology has that dark side. And it's something that we have to be very much mindful of and aware. So while we're really interested and, you know, passionate around the many innovative opportunities that are being created by digital technologies, we also have to have really an eyes wide open approach, again, so we can anticipate and possibly mitigate some of the many evolving risks. And there are a huge amount of risks, as we know, in 2021 that's occurring. So we should really look at, I guess, in terms of an organization, to look at evolving their standards. And how would one evolve standards is to really analyze and assess where they're currently at the moment, and look at their best practice and, you know, their compliance, and where do they want to be, what's, you know, what's happening and could happen in the future. And again, to embrace new security approaches. So I think that's really something that we have to be mindful, that sometimes it can be very daunting and it can be quite scary looking at all of the cybersecurity hacks and everything that's happening around the world. But there's also a lot of security approaches that can help minimize that risk. And we're here to discuss that today with the ecosystems, that there are lots of opportunities to help. And again, build partner ecosystems. So as my colleague had said about ecosystems, you know, it's about the transfer of knowledge, you know, sharing the information, learning from each other. So it's okay not to have all of that information within your organization. It's about building an ecosystem, understanding how can you be prepared for the future, etc. And again, educate providers. So the providers, again, could be your employees, how they actually deal with the threats. And again, third party providers, which is crucial. Because again, that would go into your compliance of how do you monitor, you know, how they gather and collect their data, etc. So privacy and security. So again, security is all about safety. And when we think of security, we think of the term about, you know, national security, or even from a physical side of things, aspect of looking at a security guard in a building. But from an information point of view, we're looking at the practice of preventing unauthorized access use, disclosure, disruption, modification, inspection, recording, or destruction of data or information. I'm sure we'll all agree that's quite a mouthful, but really the key area is about preventing unauthorized access use. Because when there is a breach of data and that access use, as we said, the dark side, we have individuals that, you know, can copy, change data, publicize it. So that's all of the information that we've discussed. How do we actually protect it, and what is the practice around it? So again, privacy then is the ability for an individual to exclude themselves or information about themselves, and thereby express or present themselves in the way that they select. So again, it is my right to have the ability as an individual to not to disclose information and to disclose information only as I see fit. So the relationship then, I guess, between security and privacy is the general principle here is that security does not give you privacy. However, it enables you to have privacy. So it's almost next to impossible not to have privacy if you don't have security. So it's really important, privacy and security. And if we look at it from a corporate privacy versus security, so the corporate privacy again is, you know, from an organization is how do they collect your data? You know, does it have integrity? Is it high quality data? And then the security side of it is, you know, where do they store it? What security measures do they have to protect it? That, you know, it isn't it isn't fraught towards unauthorized access. So that's really important. And again, just around the use and disclose personal information for the corporate privacy, again, high quality data to make sure that they have on their customers and where it's stored and unauthorized access. So you'll see there the overlap between the two areas, and the protection of personal information, which is crucial. So I just want to very briefly touch on GDPR, because I know Christine in Bulgaria, she's going to give us an overview of what's happening in Europe in GDPR, which I'm really looking forward to. But again, it's really important when we think of data and we understand it, is that the law again was passed in 2016 and it took effect in 2019. It was a huge milestone in privacy regulation for Europe. However, I'm sure as we're aware that even though it's intended for Europe, it has a global milestone, because any organization that wants to deal with an organization in Europe has to abide by the GDPR principles. So I'm not going to go through the GDPR principles at the moment. I think we're all very much aware of what we need to do with the data and store it, etc. And the security is paramount really around that. So the accountability for people entrusting their data to you, and I think that's really important from an organization's point of view, is that it has to be core, it has to be really important, because organizations trust you, or rather customers trust you. They're giving you that information and they have a trust within you that you're going to protect it at all costs. So every company that's handling the data also, there's the legal aspect of it, which is crucial, and I'll discuss in a moment. So there's a legal obligation within your organization to protect all of the data also. So when we look at cybersecurity, which I've just briefly discussed there, we look at cyber crimes. And as Andy mentioned there, it's something that's very much, in the forefront in terms of the media at the moment, in terms of cyber crimes. So again, cybersecurity refers to the activities necessary to protect our online identities and the data that we generate. So it's really important of, cyber crimes, individuals or groups of people, again, that they have malicious intent to take advantage of vulnerabilities in a system. And, even the best systems in the world, they've become very sophisticated in terms of their technology to get through particular systems. So it's all about knowledge and, doing an analysis after the particular event. But something that I'd also like to mention that I think is really important when we look at cybersecurity and cyber crimes, we think automatically of larger organizations, etc., and ransomware and all of that. However, it's happening when we look at, big, criminals in terms of their technology. We look at perhaps individuals that have been, the ransomware expected. So it's really important. And I've always said it over the last number of years to my students, many of them are mature students, but also certainly, and I guess especially to the younger generation, is that we are working, in a technology-based world, and we are creating a digital footprint. And that footprint can never be deleted. And it's really naive if you think it can. So when, if I was to think back when I was growing up, I didn't have that, and you change as you get older. But, when people are just saying things that they may not be very knowledgeable about and share it, we all know perhaps in the future that an employee or an employer rather actually could look, and there's a persona, a digital persona. So it's really, really important that we protect that digital persona. And when we look at vulnerabilities, there are individuals, they might not be big masterminds, but again, they look at vulnerabilities and they may say, look at people's history, etc., and blackmail them in terms of ransomware really, and ask for particular demands, or they'll show something to employers. And it's happening at such a regular stage that I think it's something that we have to be really, really mindful about. And again, we need to protect ourselves against cyber threats, like we would in the physical world. So again, the physical world, we have a great police force, but yet we lock our front door, we lock our car. So with the cybersecurity end as well, it's all about security. It's really, really important around security. And again, how do cyber criminals operate? Well, there are many, many techniques, and I'm sure we could go through them all morning. But, a simple one that's quite often used to start with is phishing with a PH. And again, I have the information there. It's a very simple one, because again, it could be just perhaps you get an email from your IT department and, it looks really like legitimate in terms of all the information is there, the email address is your company logo, and they're asking you to say that there's an issue with the system. They want you to log out and log back in again. And of course, when you do, you're going into a clone website and they have your username, and they're going to log back into the system with your password and username, and they may take data, delete it, change it, whatever it may be, copy a full corporate database, whatever their objectives may be. So it's really important when we think about the cybersecurity training that we give within an organization, that it's really, really important that, we do look very clearly in terms of all of the information that's been sent to us, because again, the logos look. So if we look around the malware side of things, is that, it comes from two words, malicious software, and ransomware is part of the family. So what makes it so important really is the wording. It's ransomware, and it's something that's very much in the media, again, with our own healthcare service, because they can take over the full operation system or individual files, and is encrypted. So again, when an employee logs in, they'll get the message and the ransomware is there. So it's something that's becoming very, very sophisticated, etc. So this is where we really look at our cyber hygiene. So again, cyber hygiene is not an IT problem, it's a business risk problem. And I think, and I'm sure we'd all agree as individuals, that it's moving away from, oh, this is IT. It's very much really, really important of how do we actually protect it from a legal obligation, from an organization, from a trust, with trust within the organization, because if that's damaged your reputation, people entrust you, to actually protect their data, and again, build a culture. So I'm very much all about culture, because I think it really starts with the culture that everybody understands that there is a threat. There's a daily threat within their organization, and they have to, take it very serious and make sure that they abide by it. Again, and security awareness training. And you see many organizations, it's not a case now that it's something within the HR department and it's rolled out and IT does it, and it's taken to a consultancy department can come in and it's half a day. It needs to be ongoing. People really, really needs to understand how important it is. And as an organization, your security cannot be relying on an employee not clicking a link. Now, it can happen, and of course they're going to download something, but most of the information that you even read about the cyber attacks in different organizations, and I've been reading about many different health cases within America, they haven't even been reported. So, for example, an email came through about, something about a bonus, your bonus could be increased by, and they clicked into the link and they downloaded it, and then their computer went into restart. They didn't actually report that. So they didn't report it that it was an outside link that came through, that they downloaded it. For whatever reason, it wasn't picked up, but they didn't report it. And of course, then eventually 24 hours later, it led into what exactly happened. So it's really important about security awareness training, and that they feel comfortable, that they're not in fear of, oh God, have I done something wrong? Because it can happen. You're dealing with very sophisticated cyber criminals, and again, controls and compliance. And that's really where the compliance is so important, that everybody is transparent and on the same page around it. And again, your threat intelligence. So when you look at your threat intelligence, you look about, what's the jewels, the crown jewels that you're trying to protect in terms of data. You can't protect everything, but you really want to start an overview. And again, cyber compliance and legal compliance. So the legality side is huge. And yes, insurance companies, whether or not they pay, and you have your cyber insurance there for ransomware and protection. But for example, if you say, right, we are going to pay these criminals, well, you might be breaking international law in a particular country to pay them, because they are in fact criminals. So there's a huge area around the compliance. And again, the data breach, Gdpr, you must report it immediately that there has been a data breach. There's, a data breach within your organization. And again, do you pay the ransomware? So do you pay the ransomware? And I was part of a really interesting conversation a number of months ago with an organization at a board level, and that was something that they were really, really looking for. They were building it straight into their compliance. So it's not something that you get a phone call as a CEO at 4 o'clock in the morning, do we actually pay? So the answer is, do we? And again, the legality side of it. But also, if you've been heavily underinvesting in your actual cyber facilities, is that, if you don't have enough backups, you don't have everything that you need, perhaps you may need to pay to try and get the data back. But again, you say, you've often heard it, you've heard in the media about, getting the encryption code back. Even if you were to get it back and it was to work, you still have to do a full security policy check throughout, which is very, very costly, to make sure that everything is secure and all your systems are secure. So it does cost a lot of money. And I guess what we're saying is that, if you say, right, we would pay perhaps, and you say we'd pay this percentage, well, why don't you use that particular percentage and invest it into where you are at the moment? So prevention is better than cure. So it's basically, how do we actually stop this from happening? And again, this is where we discuss scenario planning, you know, going through these scenarios if this particular event happened, etc. So if we look at the common attack patterns, you know, ransomware, again, it's evolving. As I said, it's becoming hugely sophisticated. The pandemic, Bitcoin, stronger encryption, etc. It's very, very much targeted on employees at the moment. And if I put up in terms of, you know, Zoom, Teams, accessing your workstations and apps, and that will come back down to, again, you know, your cybersecurity training, making sure that if somebody was to use their own personal PC, that it's kept updated, etc. for viruses. And the CEO fraud side of things is huge also. You know, it's really getting to know, and it's on the rise. And again, it's become a lot more common in the pandemic. That an example would be perhaps, you know, a CEO has sent an email to somebody mirroring accounts, for example, and has said, you know, this, you know, supplier needs this particular payment. These details have been changed, and the terminology he or she would use is the very same, and the signature sign off, everything is there. And, you know, maybe before the pandemic, I know we're going back now into the office, but they might have had a conversation in the office where Mary might have turned around and said, oh, I got your email, by the way. But when we went completely into remote working, the increase in terms of CEO fraud or any type of fraud and information and hacking that information was huge. And, you know, we are going to be working remotely a lot in the ongoing future. So something that's really important. So this is where data governance really comes in, you know, why organizations need the data governance. It's critical for cybersecurity. So it's critical that you have the standards, that you have the compliance, etc., and that you make sure that you're compliant and that you have privacy policies, and that your plan around the data governance. So your data management strategy then again is, you know, in simple terms of what is it that we're going to store the data, what do we do in the event of a cyber attack, you know, how can we limit the length of time that we're offline, etc. So that's a strategy, building a strategy really around that. And the technology systems, you know, to be resilient, that you're not paralyzed completely in an attack, that, you know, and that you have all some sort of redundancies or backups, and it takes time for you to actually go through them. But when we think of financial centers, that they would have multiple data centers, and other organizations perhaps have one. So it's about, you know, if there was a natural disaster, how do you actually get the information? How do you have the backups? What is the support that you have there, etc.? And again, if you get locked down, how do you restore it to a prior state? So why do we need, I just want to very quickly go over it, why do we need a data governance strategy? It's to improve security. So every organization, if they don't have one, should be working towards one. Again, it's to avoid inconsistency, data silos in different departments, and making sure that you're all running and transparent. Again, to improve data quality, you know, we're looking at unstructured data and to make sure that it's accurate, etc. And again, to increase analytics accuracy and give decision makers reliable information. So that's really important when we look at, well, why are we actually, what's the objective for collecting the data, you know, to start with? Again, you know, perhaps from a legal point of view, you have to, but a lot of organizations were collecting it to learn from it, you know, to learn and to make changes and to make informed decisions. So it's really, really in our best interest that, yes, from a legal point, that we've everything covered and accurate, but that we can learn from it and make, I guess, the right decisions. And again, to agree on common data definitions, and that we have a shared understanding. And again, to implement and enforce policies and ensure compliance and data privacy laws. Sorry, my slide is stuck. Yeah, cybersecurity guiding principles, just very quickly before we finish up. So again, cybersecurity is an enterprise-wide risk management issue. It's not just an IT issue. And I believe that as organizations, we're completely moving away from that. We want to understand, again, the legal implications of cyber risks, to a company. And you want to have adequate access to cybersecurity expertise and discuss risk management regularly in board meetings. And I'd also like to add to that is that somebody from that department with cyber expertise should not be regularly in a board meeting, as in every 3-4 months, perhaps introduce something. They should have a seat at the table. So it's really, really important that they have a seat, they have a presence, because it's very much part of the organization. And again, to ensure that the management establishes an enterprise-wide risk management framework, again, with the staffing and budgets in support. And again, that you identify and develop plans to, which risks to avoid, accept, mitigate, or transfer. The IT risk management side of things that I just want to discuss very, very briefly. The cybersecurity risk is what we've spoken about, and also around your information technology policy, your service risk about, it's your backup policy, your recovery policy, your third party risk then is really, really important, because it's something that you have to be really, really mindful about as an organization, about what is a third party risk there when you're transferring information over. So that's really important that you have the agreement and clauses in place there. Your strategy and your architectural risk then is really around, your cloud strategy, your information strategy. Your change risk is really around, I guess, your change management projects, your project management style, and the key processes around it, procurement, compliance, etc. So my last slide that I'd just like to discuss briefly is that, cybersecurity strategy, what good looks like. Well, to start with is you want to identify and be informed, and that would be basically, what are the crown jewels? What is it that we need to protect? We can't protect everything, but what's something that we have to be really informed about? Again, respond to, to any, this is where we look at any sort of information coming in, URLs, all the information that we look at, go into protect, detect, and recover. So it's a cycle really in terms of, this strategy is built into a very high level, obviously, strategy, but it's to take into consideration that you should be mindful of all of the particular areas in regards to protecting our individual data in cybersecurity. Okay, so thank you very much for your time. That's just a very quick overview. And I welcome your discussion, also welcome the panel in to have a discussion also in regards to what we discussed around cybersecurity. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Diane. I think it's clear when you explore the issues around cybersecurity, especially given the current circumstances with remote working, there's so many risks to analyze, and certainly for small businesses, the risk of somebody committing a quite serious crime against you is raised enormously. What we're going to do now is go to the first of our experts who come in from Finland. And I'm going to ask Jani to introduce the work that takes place within central Finland in a city called Jyväskylä. There's a very specialist applied university there that have set up Isectech, which specialises in cybersecurity itself. And to give an overview there, because we've heard from Diane, the potential risk for businesses and the idea of protecting your crown jewels, and that's on a very much a personal level or a small business level. But we're here now from Jani, I think on a much larger scale, some of the work that's going on within Finland. So over to you, Jani. But before we start off, I'd also invite anyone who's attending today, if you've got any questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A, either on Diane's session that she's done, or obviously about our ecosystems and issues, but also with each of the speakers, whether it's Jani or Christina or Hazel. Because afterwards, what we want to do is have a bit of a discussion about what you think are some of your issues, maybe, and also if there's anything you've not understood or you think could be, perhaps broadened out by our speakers. So pop them in the Q&A session at the bottom, and we won't necessarily stop any presentations. We'll come back to the speakers afterwards, or as we said, we've got time, I think around 11:40 to have a small fireside chat. To get some Q&As in, and also to get some, I'm going to be quite radical and ask for your opinion, because this affects all of us, whether we're individuals or small businesses or large companies, about what steps you think people should be taking and what your needs be. So have a think and pop them in the Q&A sessions. But for now, let's go over to Jani, all the way from Jyväskylä. Jani, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So would you like me to share my screen?
Yep, I'll do that.
So just a second, don't have the rights yet.
I'll just ask my colleague Sarah to do that. Sarah, if you could allow Jani to be the presenter.
Okay, now
your special button.
Okay,
Yeah, you should have those rights, Yanni. Let me know. Yeah,
Okay.
there you go. Mhm.
Okay, excellent. So hi, everyone. As mentioned, I'm backing up my colleague Elina, who has a flu and this awful cough. So luckily we went through this material together in advance. So as Andy mentioned, I come from Tech. It's a part of University of Applied Sciences here in central Finland, a city called of Jyväskylä. I'm going to present you a little about cybersecurity exercises in general, and I'm going to present you a healthcare cyber range, which is an environment where healthcare or the Finnish healthcare system and the service providers and suppliers can exercise their cybersecurity preparedness and so forth. Overall, about the cybersecurity exercises, why to highlight them is that we believe that the cybersecurity exercises is the cheapest and the best possible way to find out the gaps where to investment in kind of the process development or procedures or technology investments or raising awareness or raising people's skills in cybersecurity, no matter in which domain the business operates. A bit about Tech, Jyväskylä Security Technology. As Andy mentioned, we are professionals in cybersecurity, and in a few years back we started ramping up data analytics and artificial intelligence capabilities too. And within these domains we do research, development, training in business organizations, and as part of the University of Applied Sciences we provide education also. What special do we have is that we have a cyber range, which is the Finland's national cyber range, and within there we do various cybersecurity exercises and trainings. And what's special about cyber range? The term is probably not familiar to all of you, so just to quickly open it up before going into the details. There is no clear definition for a cyber range. It's usually described that it's an environment or technical platform where one or multiple persons can get training or get exercised or certified, or products or processes can be certified, or there can be held competitions and so forth. So it's kind of an abstract definition. What we have in our cyber range, the realistic global cyber environment, is that it mimics the real internet. We have the kind of a normal structures that the internet has, and everything that Diane previously mentioned about these cyber threats, whether it's ransomware or email spoofing or whatever, we can all run those kind of threats here in this environment safely. We can use real malware safely, so we can provide exercises to the attendees with the kind of real threats that are out there in the real internet without any kind of possible harm to the operational environment, to the attendees' home organizations. And what we have in business perspective in the cyber range, we have started developing the environment in 2011, and first cybersecurity exercises were held in 2013. And now we are 2021. Today we have various business domains and business services with the software and the integrated processes and the interconnected processes. I mean, like in an e-commerce site, a web shop, it's depending on financial organization and its credit card systems, and they both are dependent on the electricity company. Also, they are dependent of the internet service provider. So mixing kind of different kind of threats to certain part of the ecosystem, we can exercise the exercising organizations preparedness on various cybersecurity issues. For example, what happens if the internet connection is down between the e-commerce site and the financial organization? Or what happens if the electricity is shut down from the financial organization, for example? But today we are focusing on the digital healthcare domain. A bit about the cybersecurity exercises and their types. We are specialized in 3 types of cybersecurity exercises. Live exercise, it's a scenario where it is executed as live, so it includes active actions of adversaries. These adversaries are simulated by our employees, so we're not hiring some unknown team from somewhere, but our staff is doing the adversary part there. We do digital forensic and incident response exercises and kind of a capture the flag exercises. The later part of this presentation will focus on the live exercises, which are the kind of spearhead of our cybersecurity exercises. We have had this project, Healthcare Cyber Range, which creates a healthcare cyber range. And the aim of this project is to secure and kind of raise the patient safety and patient care in the healthcare professionals and the IT technicians by exercising them and about these cyber threats and various defense methods. Using this environment, the Finnish healthcare actors can train their staff skills in cybersecurity, whether they are kind of administrative or whether they are the healthcare professionals or some IT technicians or whatever. But overall, it comes to the question kind of that what happens in the networks might have some affections to the patient safety. And if there was a kind of a critical enough, let's say, ransomware situation, the patient safety could be severely affected. For example, a intensive care unit control software or our systems could be shut down or could be blocked. And it's very, very severe situation. I'm not kind of going into the full edge on kind of what could be happening in the worst case, but to highlighting that what are the possibilities that could be exercised in this environment. And what have we built and what has been the kind of a baseline for creating this environment is that we have collected the needs and requirements for the project partners and using some open source information available. And within this project, we are extending our cyber range to meet the needs and requirements from these partners and from the Finnish healthcare system as we have interpreted those. And as mentioned, we can simulate a wide range of realistic cybersecurity incidents that could happen in a healthcare organization. There are some things still in the development, but we are looking forward that during the summertime we get those things done, and we are organizing a pilot exercise in September this year. The pilot, although it's a pilot and where we are piloting the built environment and kind of verifying that we have understood kind of the needs and requirements correctly, a little less than 100 persons are attending to the exercise. Even though it's pilot, it's still quite large in the number of participants. So what's included? We have modeled and created simulated services from the public services which are used in the Finnish healthcare sector, like Kanta.fi, which is a national patient data repository and prescription services. We have modeled Kela, which is the social insurance institution of Finland. Not all of part of it, but those parts that are directly related to the healthcare sector. We have modeled digital population data services agency, which is the register holder for the national level population information and the identification systems. We have modeled a pharmacy, 2 hospitals, one with the intensive care unit and some actual medical devices in there. We have created our own simulated patient information system or electronic health record system. And we have created a population generator because of in the cybersecurity exercise, you need the technical platforms, you need to have the data traveling there, and this population generator, which can also generate realistic health records, kind of gives the feeling that okay, this environment is live. We have patients coming and going. Somebody is buying the drugs they have been prescribed, and so forth. And besides this, we have also modeled laboratory services and imaging services and so forth. So it's very, very large environment in this exercise environment. Some of these medical devices are simulated, but there are also some real medical devices like a patient simulator and a patient monitor and a ventilator. And these real medical devices are integrated into this exercise environment. So this makes it possible to really try to affect to the patient care in the networks by performing some cyber attack or incident into the hospital. So what lives in the network escapes from there to the physical world. Why should organizations take part in the cybersecurity exercises? Taking part regularly in cybersecurity exercises, these organizations can better recover from possible cyber incidents and systematically develop their knowledge, develop their preparedness, and as mentioned, by exercising, these organizations identifies development targets in processes, procedures, technologies, and knowledge, skills, and competencies of employees. And kind of following the internal practices of an organization, it builds kind of a confidence in securing the patient safety and continuity of the operations. So it means that the exercising organizations are using their own procedures and processes and so forth. We are not giving them, but they're using their own. What we are offering is the exercise environment. It's a good way to prepare for some cyber attack or cyber incident to exercise. And by doing this, taking part of cybersecurity exercises, the emergency preparedness and crisis management can be also exercised. So depending on the exercise type and what the participant organizations are willing to practice, we can include also the public relationships and the top management in the exercises. So at the bottom, it's technical as cybersecurity is, but from there onwards, we can take also other parts from the organizations and exercise these elements. We are using realistic scenarios, realistic attacks, so preventing and detecting and responding to these attacks and incidents makes the organization more prepared. Because we are not in silos, when a cyber incident happens, at least in large scale, it requires cooperation skills to recover from it. It helps the organizations to understand and identify potential threats and incident mechanisms and how to protect against them. So it comes to the question that what Diane mentioned about the strategy, about what is critical, but from the devices and services and so forth, it comes to the procurement or the buying phase. These risks should be already estimated from there. This is something kind of that the organizations can judge or think about by themselves. So what is the kind of exercise scenario? First of all, the technical environment provides huge opportunities to exercise these cyber incidents, but we are together with the participants planning the background story together to enrich the training experience and create understanding of the surrounding situation. So kind of the background story includes those kind of risk and threats that these participants see critical for these organizations that they should be exercised. As mentioned, we have the attack vectors and threat actors that exist in the real life, in the real world. And we are using latest intelligence information from open source on how adversaries are doing, which are the tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, to execute these kind of attack campaigns. If you like, and I hope that you can find the time to find this, watch this short, a little less than 6 minutes video about the technical environment description and the situation. There's some video elements where you can perhaps understand a bit more about that, what kind of the environment and the whole kind of a center we have is actually. So please watch it, and I would like to hear your feedback from it. It's texted in English. That's my part. I hope you received some understanding on what are cybersecurity exercises and what have healthcare cyber range project provided and what is going to be piloted in this September.
Thank you, Yanni. Very, very informative, and I have to say I visited Yanni and visited the centre there and was very impressed with the work that's been undertaken there within Finland. It's really is eye-opening for us to see that level of expertise from one of both our members and members of the local ecosystem there in Jyväskylä in central Finland. Quite an eye-opener. we'll come back with some questions. Don't forget to pop your questions in the Q&A function below you. If you've got questions for Yanni or Diane or anybody you hear from today. What we'd like to do now is move from the project that we've heard of for cybersecurity and healthcare down to focus straight into our ecosystem within Bulgaria. Bulgaria joined our ecosystem network this year, within the last year, and I can't overemphasize what a great shock it was to see such an enormous amount of activity from Bulgaria, both in terms of AI and privacy and cybersecurity, all on our patch, and we didn't know, and they've taken a great leap into our ecosystem network, which is fantastic. And hopefully today, Christina will continue to open your eyes and see what expertise we've got there within another of our ecosystems. So obviously we've gone from the central Finnish ecosystem in Finland, and we're going down to connect the dots now to Bulgaria. And over to you, Christina.
Hi, Andy. Thank you for the lovely word that you mentioned. Happy to be here, and fantastic event so far, quite informative. Probably I will start just to share a little bit about my background and about all this ecosystem that Andy mentioned. So I'm leading several clusters. One of them is dedicated to health and life sciences in Bulgaria, but also I'm leading a cluster for artificial intelligence that provide me a perfect opportunity to discover more and more opportunities coming from those cross-industrial, cross-sectoral, and cross, of course, industry cooperation that may have. In a very recent time, we started also to supporting creation of a cybersecurity community here in Bulgaria. And all of the things that we are actually do, we are not so smart to, I don't know, to figure it out, all of them, but we practically work with our colleagues from abroad and trying to create a sustainable European ecosystem. We are part of the European AI Forum, which provides us a perfect opportunity to collaborate with our colleagues from France, Germany, Austria, Dutch, Sweden, and many more. So for me, it will be happy, of course, to share more about the perspectives, the challenges, the opportunities that are coming from the cybersecurity. Can you please hold my presentation?
Sure.
Because unfortunately, yeah, I will represent through my phone, but yeah, I think it's not the issue.
Now,
Okay.
can everyone see the slides?
I think yes.
Okay, thank you.
I can, so everybody. Okay,
Yes.
Can you please, the next slide? Of course, can you please switch the next slide? Okay, my idea for today is very briefly, of course, to share more about what is the impact of cybercrime when it comes to a biotech, and of course, what kind of a traditional and non-traditional project we started in order to resolve this problem. The next slide. You can't move it, or? Okay, so as you can see, more and more cyber crimes, cyber attacks are going over the biotech because of the COVID-19. Right now, one of the most priceless information is not even to bring the vaccine to the market, but to take all the needed data to create such. So this is a huge issue that we observed in the last year. Of course, here I took a very brief report from who actually showed that over 80% of the companies are somehow having a sign of targeting attack against them. Please, the next slide. Okay. the cyber security, the cyber crimes, of course, they are trying to attract the data coming from the pharmaceutical sector. Why? Of course, as I mentioned, because right now the biotech sector actually providing and working over a solution that actually released a huge potential market. So this information is priceless. The most vulnerable things when it comes to companies and their achievement is dedicated, of course, with IP protection. This is a huge issue. We already see several very strong examples coming from this. Of course, as much as the company is going on digital and trying to make more automatized approach, so much vulnerabilities they have. The other issue that we see, of course, is connected with the public infrastructure and usage of the public infrastructure from the business sector, because most of the regulation, most of the rules that for usage of this public structure are actually connected to discovering and opening your data, which actually stop and prevent, of course, a lot of companies and R&I projects to use this structure coming from the different national or European programs. Please, the next slide. I can, of course, provide different examples for how much mistakes and what are the targets that actually most of the cyber crimes trying to attract. Of course, I mentioned already about the intellectual property, but also one of the significant part is next to patient and patient information. Right now, probably all knew that there are significant European projects dedicated to the genome examination. 1 billion genomes is called the project, but not only, more and more open data is dedicated and delivered worldwide in order to find a solution and of course healing for the different sickness. Of course, it's quite significant for the companies which are dealing with the biotech. They very often work with the vendors, with the third parties, which of course need to follow their securement also process. I was very glad to see about these models, these cybersecurity exercise, and of course after the event I will be really curious to understand how we can actually implement those solutions and making some kind of a stress test that's supporting the companies in the biotech and life sciences sectors. Of course, one of the issues that we face also is connected with work with the public authorities. Very often, unfortunately, and Bulgaria unfortunately have a bad example. We're having a breach links to the data. So this is something that we need to focus also our forces in order to resolve and to find the possible problems. Please, the next slide. Okay. What is the top cybersecurity priority when it comes to a biotech? Of course, the bad guys always searching for the next target, and because the biotech companies right now they having a lot of advertisement and they become more and more popular, they are actually more common going on the focus of these bad guys. Of course, when it comes to a cybersecurity, it has a lot of business imperative. It is a needed. I see more and more company having cybersecurity strategies, but this process, especially in our region of Eastern Europe, is quite weak. So I will be more than happy and appreciate, of course, more and more events in which we can actually exchange such a good know-how to be done, and of course to trying, of course, to implement those good examples. Actually, in Bulgaria so far, one of the very logical solution is, of course, dedicated to encryption and tokenization, usage of AI solution. But I believe that more and more use cases and ideas can be bring. So we are open, of course, in order to distribute everywhere. Please, the next slide. as I mentioned, when it comes to ecosystem, to the clusters, we are always going on the practical point of view. So please, the next slide. I will share a little bit ideas that coming from the ecosystem until I'm preparing for this topic, because I'm not a specialist in cybersecurity. My specialty is actually the ecosystem people, and I took the best possible scenarios from them. Of course, I mentioned that one of the solution is artificial intelligence. It is quite interesting because when we're talking about the chain between and connection between AI and cybersecurity, it is actually two-dimensional one. In one hand, of course, the artificial intelligence can bring more and better solution when it comes to a cybersecurity by providing a different machine learning prediction models that actually can prevent any attacks, but also the opposite direction is also working when it comes to artificial intelligence and dealing with a lot of huge amount of data. Cybersecurity solutions are required, of course. I mentioned about those cross-industry, cross-regional approach that we proactively work on it, and I'm sure that when it comes and trying to think what are the possible solutions, how we can connect and deliver a good protection for the biotech companies with the usage of artificial intelligence and with a good cybersecurity acknowledgement and solution. Probably there are several things that we can establish. One of them, of course, is to find the best and direct connection between them. This could happen, of course, with a very strong ethical frames, because right now, when it comes to a biotech and life sciences, very often everybody knows that you're supposed to have ethical frames that regulate and support, of course, the delivery of the discoveries that can bring from this industry, but also right now more and more protection and data information is supposed to be implemented. So I strongly believe that the best scenario is to start from the ethical point of view, to start working, collaborate with between those ecosystem that I mentioned, and of course, education, more and more education and popularization of good practices. Thank you very much. I see probably that the time is running. I'm open for the questions. Thank you again.
Thanks for that, Christina. That's fascinating, because for me, certainly, we always think, oh, we need to look at cybersecurity, and there'll be a solution provider, and it's always a company we kind of think we'll be able to pull in, you know, almost a sticking plaster, as we call it in English, to fix that problem. But I think what you've offered us there is a unique way of saying, well, actually, you know, if you start to use artificial intelligence, you get to see probably a much better or more rapid set of solutions that can watch and see patterns, and I think that's really, you know, a good starting point. And I've got some questions, but we'll come back to those perhaps afterwards. Again, fascinating insights from Bulgaria. Thank you, Christina, for that. We're going to get on a plane now and fly really, really fast from Bulgaria all the way over to the US, to Texas, and welcome Hazel, who's going to talk from her perspective around cybersecurity, but also with a company, Ishka, the organization here. Hazel's got experience obviously in the US, but also from Ireland and the UK as well, and many other areas. So I'm going to do the best thing, which is to stop talking and hand over now to Hazel.
Thank you, Andy. Good morning, everybody, from a bright and early morning here in Texas. We're now at 5:15. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and what an insightful sharing of information so far from everybody. It's really such a massive topic, actually, when you think about all the different components. So for those of you who are attending, please don't be too overwhelmed, because it's very vast, as I say. So Ishka Health, yes, indeed it is, Andy. Ishka is actually the Irish or the phonetic pronunciation for the Irish word Ishka, meaning the basic, one of the basic needs to be healthy and well. So drink your water. In terms of, sorry, I'm just trying to hit the screen. You can see the screen, is that correct? Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yes, so I'm founder and principal digital health advisor with Ishka Health. And just a little bit of background about who I am. We're specialists within healthcare on executive advisory, organizational development and change management. And with that actually comes a huge gamut in terms of when you actually focus down into those areas. So the how, the why, and when in healthcare. I previously worked in technology. I did work in Holland in the telecoms industry, in London in the financial with Bloomberg Reuters and Merrill Lynch. And it was basically one day through my young daughter saying, "Mom, when are you ever going to have breakfast with me?" That made me actually just come back home and think about quality of life and focus on family, at which point I was brought into healthcare in Hertfordshire in England. So that's where my knowledge of the industry was born. In terms of at that point in time, and it's now over 17 years ago, it was at the very beginning of digital transformation. So I have been privileged to see exactly the journey from paper to digital and what the challenges, what the successes have been with that. Why? What brought me to America? It was yet again a family decision. And I landed in Austin just under 3 years ago, which categorically, even though I'm Irish born and bred, I have no regrets being here. And it's a good place to be in Texas. So just to understand where I sit within the cybersecurity space, I'm a member within Austin of what's called the OWASP. So that's actually the Open Web Application Security Protection organization. There's a very, very big conference in Dublin just, I believe, over 2 years ago, connected with that. I'm a contributor to what's called the 405D Task Force, which is part of the Health and Human Services, a federal organization. Privileged to be amongst many key cybersecurity experts, technical and otherwise, across America with healthcare organizations. I'm also as well a business advisor to DelMed, which is an anchor university here in Austin. So if you think of Stanford or Trinity College or any of those, then their innovation arm here in Austin. And I'm also as well part of the Texas International Collaborative as well, which is a key group of people about focusing on sharing data and what comes with that and the challenges with it as well. So next slide, Hazel. Just one thing really I thought that would be of interest to understand is why and where did health come about as a critical infrastructure? So we could always say that the health industry has always been key. To Andy's point earlier, we're all part of it, we're all patients, but particularly within America back in 2013, there was the Presidential Policy Directive, and that really brought to the forefront how health is part and equally, well, we can see from this slide, if not more actually, than part of the oil and gas or any other aspect, food and agriculture, etc. The Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, as is known locally, actually created frameworks around this. And of course, it's at the forefront with Homeland Security as well. This I suppose really as a result of this being born, there are many key leading organizations in the US that are supporting this and focus specifically on the healthcare industry as well. Then, of course, we had WannaCry back in 2017, and that unfortunately brought in creep in terms of where health sits as a priority, and the actual policy directive was revised at that point in time as well. So in terms of then why is this important, what we're talking about today in actually having data culture surrounded by, with a focus on cybersecurity. So perhaps we all know what this little bowl of spikes is about. It's COVID-19. And back in February 20, or some will definitely argue earlier, we knew this as the novel coronavirus. And this was basically came upon us to wreak absolute havoc in a very unprepared world. Interestingly, when I got involved in cybersecurity at the beginning of 2020 here within the US on a national level, looking at due diligence, understanding we know what the problems are, we know there are lots of solutions out there, but let's actually look at what the gaps and how can actually supporting cybersecurity in healthcare made better. In March 2020, we saw, unfortunately, an totally unexpected acceleration of attacks in cybersecurity. Perhaps we've heard of the phrase at warp speed. I use the fact that cybersecurity hit healthcare at warp speed. Just a little bit of extra information. Warp speed actually came from the Trump administration in terms of how do we actually get vaccinations out there, bringing together private and public entities to help the nation and globally. So when I look at these two entities together at the same time, I suppose really some people are now paraphrasing me as saying that in COVID-19 brought need brought innovation, and innovation brought change. And with that came various technologies to support and help everybody. But the interesting thing that with this twin pandemic, there's an increase in data coming in from, unfortunately, those who are becoming ill, and yet our data is being attacked at the same time. So I suppose from May the 12th of this year as well, the White House published its executive order to issue stronger federal support cross-industry as well. Certainly, Andy, you mentioned about the solar winds and of course the pipeline issue and to support cybersecurity, but a key organization within healthcare specifically on the 11th of June has written requesting yet again specific and dedicated support to healthcare. So this actually shows that the priority for where cybersecurity sits with healthcare, not just alone in America, and unfortunately, to my colleagues earlier, globally. So, as the saying goes, Red Adair, he was a known US firefighter, and he was called upon to put the fire out. The heat is on now more than ever. As I say earlier, with the increase in data and what that brings, and Diane mentioned about how it's been used to actually re-strategize and to help businesses retarget and pivot in terms of what their mission and objectives are, then this is an area that we really have to think about. So where the future of work is, Diane, you mentioned about, working from home as well. And we call this, of course, the hybrid of work in terms of protecting our own network, and also as well about everything to do with technical, the privacy of our own data. If we look at ourselves as individuals, it's not just about healthcare, it's our own personal accounts, it's our own business needs at home. I know that Christina mentioned as well about the increase in terms of breaches, and I just put in some basically information to show, and this is just in US, about from a visible point of view, the enormity of breaches and attacks that have happened. I did earmark May 21 for obvious reasons in Ireland, to which I've been involved in discussions with over the last 18 months as well. So data analytics, to the point as well, is a business to optimize its performance, and let's look at how we can actually, I suppose, help on that score. So in terms of be in the know, this is, in creating this, I thought about, well, yeah, what do we know actually? So if we look at these wordles, clearly I'm a fan of them. I've used them twice. And I guess one thing which stands out for me is actually on the top left-hand corner is the human aspect. Where's the people element in all of this? So we have technologies to defend and protect, but equally as well in terms of the healthcare aspect as well, we have to look at what has been brought about here. So cybersecurity in healthcare involves the protection of electronic information and assets from unauthorized access, use and disclosure. So whether that's internal, the most inappropriate person looking at our personal records, right through to these external attacks, but equally as well the internal ones. So there are three goals of cybersecurity, which I'd like to share with you, which is also known as the CIA Triad Effect. So it's confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. And I guess in looking at this now moving forward, we always have to be considerate of how are we going to be cared for example, from at home, remote consultations. We know that, for example, telehealth has been one of those technologies that has been adopted. Yet again, I'll use at warp speed, which in my experience has had difficulty in gaining tractions over the years, and COVID-19 comes along, and of course now this is part of our world in terms of consultations and part of our care that comes with us. We also as well have to, there was mention on AI and what that looks like, particularly with imaging and the data that that brings as well. So my question to you is, do you know your data? Do you know what, and particularly for startups, you know, I'm very cognizant as well, being an executive advisor to healthcare startups, that leadership are so focused on the business and actually getting it to market, and what does the operational aspect look like, and where is our pilot going to happen and everything. But I think it's really important, actually, I know it's really important to be aware of understanding and seeing your business immediately through what data you hold, what will you be looking at with a cybersecurity lens. So you know, I can just mention, as I say, everything from telehealth. We're now using curbside, or what they call here, pickup and delivery, in terms of ordering our groceries online, as well as family and bonding. We all use WhatsApp, we all use Zoom and everything. And all of this is, I suppose, what could be termed as more vulnerabilities and a more opportunity to actually be hacked or be threatened in this manner. I guess one of the things which is really important, that while we know what we know, what do we not know? That's a question that you know, I constantly ask leaders in the boardroom, but sometimes as well ourselves. And how do we defend and protect our data? How do you know? Do you know your assets? Are you able to term your assets? Our assets, as part of cybersecurity, we know that organizations don't necessarily have done inventory on their assets to understand the vulnerabilities. I will challenge your most valuable assets actually are your people and the human side. So now, as they say, or in Texas, data is the new oil and gas when you look at what we're talking about today, from to Andy's point, to 10,000 feet. So how and what do we go about with this? People, Dan, I know you mentioned that culture is very important to you. It's my absolute passion. It gives me a wide, broad-eyed face. And how do we actually build this? Yet again, for startups, it's something that perhaps is not an immediate focus. But if you look at those people around you, however small or large your team is at this point in time, there is something that you all have in common together. You have a shared passion. In today's boardroom, we look at the CEO, the CFO, and the Chief Operations Officer could be argued as some of the key decision makers. But within healthcare, now becoming more apparent is you have the Chief Medical Information Officer. Yes, HR is absolutely fundamental from lots of different reasons, including accelerating education and awareness. Chief Nursing Information Officers, their focus now is becoming more on health informatics and getting a massive voice, if not already established within the boardroom. We have the CIO, technology. I suppose really, I sometimes say technology is the enabler. It's a fundamental part of the change element, but in the space where I am with the 405D task group, they are mainly technologists, but very welcome the human aspect, the non-technical aspect that I bring to the table as well. Interestingly, certainly in Texas, there is a phenomenal growth of the Chief Digital Officer or the Chief Data Officer. I won't go into actually what that is about, but in terms of actually building it, it's really important that the mindset is focused on the data and protecting it. And we want to actually embed this within the C-suite, that these elements are also to ask the question, are they aligned to your mission and what your vision for your organization is? To the point as well, if you don't know that, well, ask yourself, tell us what you want. Yes, what you really, really want. We're talking about sharing data as well in silos. We see, unfortunately, from the attacks, organizations are becoming more cognizant, whether it's through legacy technology or whether it's actually just lack of cross-enterprise communication about the sharing of data. And how will the sharing of data enhance your organizational objectives as well? Really ask the question, do you actually sit and learn how to share knowledge? I wrote commitment as well because, to the point, it's really important to understand what the value of your data is and how your leadership's actions can really be underpin accelerating the sharing of it all. Data is an investment, and the people and the leadership, it's about having that understanding and willingness to change from those who are more established and more mature from the way that it used to be to actually now, what does good look like? So in a very positive and healthy way, we can actually challenge the question as well now, particularly with cybersecurity, because they're becoming so creative. You know, what is best practice? Because best practice is actually all of us out there having to tackle that, to having to change our approach as well. I did mention it earlier about assets. We can call this talent, but I personally like to share it as more the human side as well. And I've written a paper on humanizing the change. And it's also very much as well about investing in your people, your biggest asset, and how to actually protect your valuable data so that you can to consideration those both as your twins. Trust, I know that this was mentioned earlier. I'm massively looking to understand this. And while trust is actually about having that I suppose, unspoken understanding and confidence, it's also as well to build trust. It's about sharing the vulnerabilities within this space and then actually empowering the people around you. We need a collaborative relationship of trust, and that takes time to build up. But if the mindset is there with the passion from the outset, it will happen. In terms of then, sorry, I'll move on to my own next slide. So how do we actually lock this in? I call this really more about sustainability, that once you actually look about creating a culture, and driving the trust with the data and how that's protected with cybersecurity. We know that the data is priceless, so therefore it's not just priceless in terms of on the dark web, to actually replace it, to validate it. So the only thing that we know for certain is that change is constant, and being good leaders will embrace change. It will help you to empower your staff and encourage critical thinking as well. So it's actually about having the trust from the grassroots up, as well as being able to share it from the top down. The things that I would suggest you to really consider are accountability. Ensure that people are accountable for key areas. So whether it is the data, whether it is from the technical aspect of cybersecurity, look at your communications. What does communication mean to you? Not just internally, but externally as well. What methods do you have to communicate? Is it just an email? I hear people talking about now we're working from home. Life is less personal on our Zoom calls. Have a look at that and how can you improve it. Also as well, my suggestion is have cybersecurity on your C-suite agenda. This was my reason to initiate discussions in Ireland many months ago. Where is it on the agenda? Why is it not on the agenda permanently? It's not just a quarterly or a reading a dashboard or a tick box exercise. This is a discussion that should be there constantly. And now, unfortunately, globally within healthcare, we're more aware of this than ever. Diane mentioned governance. I cannot emphasize that enough. I suppose, yet again, using the triple effect, put it under GRC, governance, risk and compliance. Understand what it's about. There are specialists out there, just like there are specialists for cybersecurity, and different elements of that, but having governance, risk and compliance helps you to understand risk, reduce it, and equally improve your organizational control and effectiveness. It's really important, I guess, on this point and for sustainability of culture, is have people to challenge. That really, to my point, is about critical thinking, and be prepared to assess constantly. I suppose the mindset of the threat actors out there is becoming more, they're thinking literally and laterally, and unfortunately being sometimes very successful as well in penetrating our systems. So to keep the fire going, and as I say, I'm not a technologist, but we know that Smart on Fire is a technology that is more secure. But to Andy's point, we are all in this together, whether we're all individual as patients or whether we're all here to enhance healthcare together. Also, as mentioned about cyber hygiene, it's so important. We've all had to go through the personal care of ourselves during COVID-19, and hand hygiene was just an instrumental part of our daily lives. Cyber hygiene needs to be equally an important part of organizational lives. We may be finished with COVID-19 and fed up and, you know, coming back to whatever the new norm is. But COVID-19 is not finished with us, and neither is cybersecurity and the challenges and the security of our data, which is also, by the way, your information. Data analytics is about developing our future to support AI, population health, disease management, predictive analytics for precision medicine. And patients' lives depend on the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of this data. We can put out the cybersecurity fire and help protect our data together. So in conclusion, yet again, if you think it's expensive to hire a professional to do the job, wait until you hire an amateur. And thank you for listening to me.
Wow, that was fascinating, Hazel. Thanks for that. And I think it's good, always good to hear Red Adair being brought back into the conversation, because I can remember when everyone was saying, who's this Red Adair going, why is he starting all these fires up? So interesting input there. And I think some really, the concept of cyber hygiene is something I've never heard of. So that's A, probably quite worrying, but B, quite useful. I think certainly a different perspective, and that's what we've attempted to do today, is to bring in both the perspectives from within Ireland, within Bulgaria, within Finland, and also now from you see a global perspective, I think, from Hazel, and just quite mind-boggling. I used to work quite often with the police, not for the reasons you may think about, but thank you, Angela. But for reasons, I used to work with young offenders in forensic psychiatry, and the key input for security for the police was to say, if you're trying to make your house secure, try and work out how you'd get in if you lose your key. Okay, and we always used to use that concept to people, you know, don't leave your doors open, don't leave your windows open, and lock your car. But we don't do the same with our digital life, do we? Because you think, you know, often you might change your phone and you buy a new phone, and new phone is then very rapidly old phone recycled with the same data. I don't know how many times you've done that, to set up your phone from scratch. I do it all the time because I mess around, as Yanni knows, with my phone. I have different operating systems every week. But I can set up a clone of my phone in less than 10 minutes. Okay? That's because I'm lazy with cyber, lazy with security, lazy with passwords. Don't be trying anything nasty, Yanni, by the way. But that shows you how, and I'm quite up to date with my knowledge on cybersecurity. But we've got thousands and thousands of people who now use these as part of their daily life for work, and we have downloaded, I'm sure you all have, Zoom or Teams or anything like that, and you all get that little box that says, I accept here all the privacy notices and consent, and we all go, let's have a nice read of 300 pages of information. We scroll down as fast as we can till we get to the accept all, because we want to download it because we're late for the meeting or whatever. So have a think about that. And the risks we pose to ourselves in our own daily cyber usage by laziness. And I'm not being an accusative here. I'm the worst one for it. But we're expecting people to have a secure health system and security system when we are that weak link. And our systems that we introduce are those open doors, those open windows, which those naughty people will come in and take advantage of. So we've had some, I think, 3 or 4 fascinating presentations. I've got some questions, and because I'm the moderator, I can see we've got a question in the Q&A, which is been I can bring in as well from Martin. In fact, I'm going to do that first. Martin, who's listening, says, if cyber threats are made.
We've lost Andy. Has everybody else lost Andy?
Yes, confirmed.
While he's
I'm quite
recovering,
happy.
you want to answer that, Hazel? I think you were starting to type an answer to Martin's question about innovations. Andy, we lost you for a second here.
Oh no! All right, okay.
You were hacked.
I've been hacked.
Oh, we've lost him again.
Hazel, go ahead.
So I would say the complete opposite, Martin. My experience here, certainly in Austin and Texas, and listening to the local health economists, it is absolutely, and to my point earlier, that it has absolutely driven innovation through the roof. Austin is absolutely on steroids. I was saying to Angela earlier that the Bay is moving in due to the innovation in healthcare, and the startups are just, we're talking about acorns to unicorns in totally from a technology point of view, right through to in the emergency department. So it's such a right time for innovation. Beyond anybody's expectations.
Thanks very much.
Sorry about
It's
that.
always a worry. You're there now, Andy. Thanks.
So yeah, I hope that was the answer to the question that I was trying to read out, because I couldn't hear. So I have a question. Just go back to Christina. Okay. You talked about using AI. How? I mean, for me to think, if I'm setting up a business and it was a health tech solution, and I'm thinking, okay, I've heard what Christina said. How easy is it for someone who's relatively new to cybersecurity and health tech businesses to start thinking, actually, I can plug in and get some AI assistance? Is it easy? As I would maybe say, is it idiot proof for people like me to start using AI?
Actually, yes and no. Of course, as I mentioned, I'm very happy that more and more company actually they creating such adoption strategy for artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, and they actually already working on under these strategies. Unfortunately, most of the biotech companies, they don't understand really what is the usage of artificial intelligence and how it could bring more and more beneficials for them. So therefore, this ecosystem that we are running is focusing to meet those specialists, because the AI specialists actually, they create a fantastic solution, fantastic innovation, bring them to the biotech, but still first they need to know what is the task. What solution they're supposed to find for what. So that's why it's very initial for both industries to work together, to sharing the common problems, and of course searching proactively a common solution. Probably here also I can bring a very good example from Europe when it comes to the sandboxes. Right now, different cities in Europe actually working their municipality, local municipalities, they're working with our communities in order to find the sandbox projects which actually combining, implementing, and showing how exactly is the easiest way to adopt artificial intelligence into your companies. Yeah, okay. So
that's helpful. Okay, that's helpful. I think because for a lot of people, it's daunting when it's, you know, it's a bit like, say, if you were looking at house security. If you started thinking, I don't understand how burglar alarms work, and for me to try and install one, it makes me even stressed even thinking about it. And it's the same. That if we've got that expertise there, that's really, really helpful. Hazel, you talked about cyber hygiene. I'm going to ask the same question for you. What for the challenged people in life, what one tip would you give around cyber hygiene that you think everybody who's listening today could adopt, that's easy, secure, and, you know, no effort or little effort?
Well, I guess one of the topical elements is, you know, passwords. And understanding what they're about, and the move towards two-factor authentication. But for those who just aren't in that space, yes, as part of their digital transformation, it's how and what does that look like? For example, people aren't really aware that when you put in a password, you can actually put in a number of words within one password. And you know, giving our password away is just, shall we say, ask is it the most appropriate thing to do? So even within a healthcare setting, is appropriate for a nurse to let a receptionist just use their password, etc., right through to understanding the impact by not protecting it, or by not actually changing it regularly. How will that so that's just one element. It's a broad topic. There are, I suppose, really, when you look at the technology aspects as well, then there are certain elements to which I'm not in a position, not being a technologist, to share. But it's really, what are the basics that we can do as individuals to help protect our data, just like our credit card, just like our car key.
Yeah, I think so. It's basics count, and I think I can't. I mean, I'm not a technology background, but certainly I understood quite quickly with IT how easy it was. If everyone's using the same system, it's a bit like if everyone had the same front door and the same front door key, people would find it really easy to access your house. But we all use the same technology. You know, we all use one of 2 or 3 different operating systems on our computers and our phones, the same programs, the same software. So it's making it easier, I think, for the bad people to access data, because everyone's information is all written in the same language with the same code. And I shudder that people don't think about that when we use these systems on a large scale to protect our finances. We wouldn't necessarily be that happy that the bank wanted to have a meeting with us via Teams and wants to put our data and our passwords in, but we use their apps quite willingly because we trust them, and that's trust that's been built up. And I think we're a long way from that with health at the moment. One question for Yanni, if possible. Yanni, how you talked about the setting up of the concept of doing exercises. How quick could you know, now that you've done that project within the project you run, could you, for instance, say to Christina for one of her organisations, obviously as part of her how quick could that be replicated as a testing exercise? Is it quite quick to spin out, or is it, you know, is it something that would take a lot of lead-in time, or how quick could that be scaled up and shipped, as I would say?
Well, kind of having a kind of a tailored exercise contents, it takes quite so many months. Okay. Because during the even the planning phase, there happens learning, and it's about kind of these kind of live exercises, like the pilot exercise we are organizing. It's there are activities for specific organizations entirely, just one organization, but because it contains the simulated Finnish healthcare system, there are contents which are targeted at multiple organizations. So kind of, for example, if a hospital is facing an attack, and the attacker is perhaps tampering with the medical records, or kind of bank account numbers or something in there, and it travels there to the central Finnish repository at the social insurance services, it will activate multiple organizations. So even during the planning phase, it takes time to learn.
Okay.
But kind of if the exercise content and the exercise environment is not changed at all, it's then quite fast to run things through. But doing kind of this kind of massive cybersecurity exercises, it takes at least 6 months of planning time.
Interesting. That's good, because it's. I think people can then get a steer as to how complex this could be. And I go back to the house analogy. That's about, like, for me, when I was younger, saying to someone who I worked with who was an ex-criminal, looking at my house, how would you get in my house? And they told me straight away. And that's the bits I secured quite quickly. Now then, we've got 3 minutes left. I think 4 minutes left. One quick question for all of our speakers today, unless we've got any others, which is, and I'll start with Diane for this one, because she'll never forgive me if I say, and this is for all our panelists as well, Christina and Hazel and Yanni, is what one step would you take today, but you've been too busy to take before today to improve your cybersecurity? What do you think? What one step, would it be something easy, or is there something I think, oh, I need to change my password, or is it, what one thing would you think of today? You think, okay, I maybe need to look at this. What do you think?
Adopt AI. It's
Oh,
quite easy
okay.
from my perspective. Yeah.
Okay.
Adopt more AI and bring them to the cybersecurity thing.
Okay. Thank you, Christina. Hazel?
I would,
Oh, sorry, Diane. Sorry, Diane.
No, I would just, I guess the importance for me is starting from the top down and having those discussions at board level and looking at your compliance and your controls and what could happen, what's happening in the media, and how would you go about and prevent it. It's really important, and that staff are comfortable with it in terms of the training and going through that assessment.
Okay, thank you for that, Diane. Hazel. Oh, you're on mute, Hazel. She's giving a secretive answer, you see.
I guess on a personal level, it's actually printing out my own healthcare record and having a summary at hand that if the systems go down and something happens to me, I have that information immediately available to share with my physicians or whatever the case may be. And I've actually heard of experiences around that.
Thank you. Yanni?
Well, I would like to make the world a better place to live, and I would like to have some sort of mechanism to educate top management of organizations and companies to understand the basic concepts of cybersecurity and kind of identifying the assets and what is protectable and what is the acceptable risk to not to protect something.
Interesting concept. Interesting concept. I think we've heard today, I think with our international panelists here, some expert input, and I'm really pleased to and I'm very sorry for keeping you up so early, Hazel, in Austin, in Texas. Time maybe to go back to bed and grab that last bit of sleep. So thank you, Hazel. Thank you, Christina, for speaking about AI so passionately from Bulgaria and bringing your influence and impact there. Thank you, Diane, for your impact and overview you've given in terms of the importance of cybersecurity in health. And then thank you, Yanni, in terms of the very practical information you gave us about your project you've been involved with around healthcare security and the types of exercises you've been using as tests. And I think we're going to see those, I think, more used and needed in the coming years and probably in the coming months. So thank you very much for all of you and for all the attendees too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you, Andy, as well.
Thank you.